He drove his brand-new Maybach 3 hours north of the city for one reason and one reason only, to laugh at the woman he believed had wasted the best years of his life. Arthur Caldwell brought his gleaming new fiancée along to mock his ex-wife's supposedly ruined existence tucked away in a rotting, worthless cabin in the middle of nowhere. But the moment his $3,000 Italian leather shoes crossed the threshold of that splintered wooden porch, the laughter died in his throat. Because what was hidden behind that rotting door was about to completely destroy his empire. The tires of the midnight blue Mercedes Maybach S680 crunched aggressively against the unpaved gravel driveway deep in upstate New York. Inside the heavily insulated climate-controlled cabin, the air smelled of expensive leather, Tom Ford cologne, and something else. Something that had been quietly brewing for 8 long months. Something that felt dangerously like revenge. Arthur Caldwell, the 42-year-old CEO of Caldwell Tech Solutions, adjusted his grip on the hand-stitched steering wheel. He glanced sideways toward the passenger seat where his 25-year-old fiancée, Chloe Bennett, was vigorously applying a fresh coat of Fenty lip gloss using the illuminated visor mirror. Chloe was everything Arthur's ex-wife had never been. She was loud, fiercely image-conscious, covered head to toe in conspicuous designer logos, and blissfully unaware of anything that did not directly benefit her social media following. "Babe, are you sure the GPS is not glitching?" Chloe complained, her manicured fingers drumming impatiently against the spotless dashboard. "We have not seen a Starbucks in 40 minutes. My cell signal just dropped to 1 bar. I cannot even post my travel story. Who lives out here?" "It is literally just trees." Arthur let out a deep, resonant laugh born of pure, unadulterated arrogance. "That is exactly the point, Chloe. Clara does not live, she exists. And she exists right here in the middle of absolute nowhere. This was her grand prize from the divorce settlement. She actually chose this." His mind drifted back to the courtroom in Manhattan 8 months ago. The divorce had been a highly publicized affair, heavily scrutinized by the financial press. Clara Hayes, his wife of 10 years, had been the quiet, unassuming foundation of his early career. When he first launched his tech startup from their cramped Brooklyn apartment, it had been Clara's modest salary as a freelance data analyst that kept the lights on. But as Caldwell Tech Solutions exploded into a billion-dollar enterprise, Arthur's ego expanded right alongside it. He had outgrown his quiet wife. He wanted someone who looked like a trophy, someone who matched his flashy new lifestyle. He found Chloe. When the divorce proceedings began, Arthur had deployed the most ruthless legal team money could buy. He had braced for a brutal fight over his stock portfolio, his Manhattan penthouse, and his offshore accounts. Instead, Clara had sat calmly at the mahogany conference table, looking mildly bored. When the judge asked what she wanted, Clara had made one single baffling demand. She wanted full ownership of an obscure 20-acre parcel of land in Rhinebeck, New York, a property Arthur had acquired years earlier in a bundled real estate deal and had completely forgotten about. It was legally appraised at just $80,000 due to its rocky, unbuildable terrain and the condemned, rotting farmhouse sitting on top of it. Arthur's lawyers had nearly cried with joy. They assumed Clara was emotionally shattered, reaching for a meaningless patch of wilderness to escape the city. Arthur had cheerfully signed the papers, walking away with 95% of his wealth and his company. "She really chose this," Chloe muttered, peering through the tinted window, at the dense, overgrown pines pressing inward against the luxury vehicle. "Instead of fighting for your millions. What an absolute idiot." "Pride makes people do incredibly stupid things, my love," Arthur said, a slow smile playing at his lips. "She wanted to prove she did not need my money. I heard through a mutual acquaintance last week that she never bought a new property. She actually moved into the crumbling structure on the land. I had to see it for myself." Arthur would not have admitted it to Chloe, but his motivations were not purely rooted in curiosity. Caldwell Tech Solutions had been bleeding capital for the past 2 quarters. A massive server failure had exposed private client data, and his board of directors was breathing down his neck. The stress was eating him alive. He needed a psychological victory. He needed to look down at Clara to see her miserable, to reassure himself that leaving her had been the right call, that he was the ultimate winner in the game of life. The Maybach turned around a sharp, treacherous curve. The GPS navigation system emitted a soft, elegant tone. "You have arrived at your destination." Arthur pressed the brake. The car rolled silently to a stop. He stared through the windshield, and a wide, cruel smile spread across his face. "Well," Arthur announced, unbuckling his seatbelt, "welcome to my ex-wife's grand estate, Chloe." Chloe let out a dramatic gasp of horror as she lowered the passenger window. "Arthur, you cannot be serious. People actually live in that?" It was worse than Arthur had imagined. The structure at the end of the deeply rutted, weed-choked dirt path looked like something out of a low-budget horror film. It was a sunken old farmhouse that had not seen a fresh coat of paint since the Reagan administration. The white siding had peeled away in ugly strips, revealing gray, rotting wood underneath. Thick, invasive ivy crawled up the side of the house, looking like the only thing holding the crumbling brick chimney together. The porch roof sagged dangerously in the center, and half the wooden shingles were missing, leaving the water-stained underlayment completely exposed. In the overgrown front yard, surrounded by waist-high dandelions and thistles, sat a faded, rust-spotted 1998 Subaru Outback with a cracked taillight. Arthur felt a surge of adrenaline, a deep and intoxicating sense of superiority washing over him. It was perfect. It was the absolute epitome of failure. "Watch where you step," Arthur warned, suppressing a laugh as he opened his door. The heavy July air hit him immediately, thick with the smell of wet earth and rotting wood. Chloe climbed out carefully, looking down in despair at her spotless, white, Christian Louboutin heels. "Arthur, there is literally mud everywhere. My heels are sinking in. This is disgusting. Can we just take one photo and go?" "We did not drive 3 hours for a photograph, Chloe. I want to look her in the eyes." Arthur adjusted the cuffs of his Brioni suit and strode forward confidently, his expensive shoes crunching over broken twigs and loose gravel. Chloe followed close behind, muttering curses as she navigated the treacherous terrain, clutching her Goyard tote tightly against her chest, as if the ambient poverty might somehow infect the leather. As they approached the front steps, Arthur noticed the unsettling silence. No barking dogs, not even the hum of a window air conditioning unit. Just the oppressive, relentless drone of cicadas. He placed one foot on the bottom porch step. The wood groaned loudly under his weight. "Careful, babe, the whole thing might collapse." Chloe snickered, pulling out her iPhone to record a video. "Visiting the ex-wife's new mansion," she typed on the screen. LOL. Arthur climbed the remaining steps. The front door was heavily weathered on, its paint cracked into a mosaic of neglect. There was no doorbell, only an old, tarnished brass door knocker in the shape of a lion's head. Arthur grabbed it and rapped it sharply against the door 3 times. The sound echoed hollowly inside the structure. They waited. 10 seconds. 20. "Maybe she is outside collecting pine cones," Chloe laughed meanly. Just as Arthur raised his hand to knock again, the heavy wooden door swung open. It swung open with startling silence, no creaking hinges, no scraping wood. Standing in the doorway was Clara Hayes. Arthur had prepared himself to see a woman broken by rural poverty. He expected unwashed hair, sunken eyes, and the exhausted posture of a woman defeated by life. Instead, he felt a strange, involuntary jolt of surprise. Clara looked incredible. She wore no makeup, but her skin possessed a vibrant, healthy glow that no high-end Manhattan esthetician had ever managed to achieve for Chloe. Her dark hair was pulled up in a casual, effortless bun held in place by a simple wooden clip. She wore faded, relaxed denim jeans and an oversized cream cashmere sweater that looked impossibly soft. And then there were her eyes. They showed no shock, no shame, no anger at the sight of her ex-husband standing on her rotting porch with his new, much younger companion. They were calm, clear, and infuriatingly amused. "Arthur," Clara said, her voice soft and completely unbothered. "What an unexpected house call." Arthur cleared his throat, quickly reclaiming his arrogant posture. "Clara, you look well, considering the circumstances." He gestured broadly at the collapsing porch roof above them. "I was in the area, thought I would stop by to check on my philanthropic contribution to your new life." Clara leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. As she shifted, the sleeve of her sweater slid slightly back. Arthur's sharp eyes caught a flash of metal on her left wrist. It was a watch. Not cheap plastic. A vintage Patek Philippe Nautilus. Arthur blinked. Where had she gotten that? That watch was worth $180,000 easily. He quickly dismissed it. It had to be a replica, purchased to maintain some appearance of dignity. "In the area," Clara repeated, raising one eyebrow. "Arthur, we are at the end of a dead-end dirt road in a town you could not find on a map without an assistant. You drove up here specifically to mock me. Let us at least maintain some intellectual honesty." Chloe stepped out from behind Arthur, her tone sharp. "Well, since we are being honest, this place is literally a dump. How do you even live like this? Do you have running water, or do you have to use a well?" Clara slowly shifted her gaze to Chloe. She did not glare. She simply studied the younger woman with the mild clinical fascination of a scientist examining a particularly loud and uninteresting insect. "You must be Chloe," Clara said softly. "I recognize you from the deposition transcripts. Your testimony about Arthur's offshore accounts was very entertaining." Chloe's face turned a deep crimson. "Excuse me?" "That is enough," Arthur snapped, stepping forward. He needed to reassert control. He needed to see the inside. He needed to see the cramped, moldy rooms, the cheap furniture, the pathetic reality of her choices. "It was a long drive. The least you could do is invite us in for a glass of water. Or do you not have clean glasses in this historic estate?" Clara remained still for a long moment. Then a slow, deeply enigmatic smile spread across her face. It was a smile that made the hair on the back of Arthur's neck stand up. It was not the smile of a defeated woman. It was the smile of a grandmaster chess player who had just realized her opponent had voluntarily walked into checkmate. "A glass of water," Clara repeated softly. "Of course, Arthur. It would be my absolute pleasure to have you both inside." She uncrossed her arms and stepped back, gesturing toward the dark interior of the hallway. "Please, come in." Arthur straightened his tie, his chest swelling with the false comfort of a small victory. He gestured for Chloe to go first. Chloe grimaced and held her breath as she crossed the weathered threshold. Arthur followed. The heavy wooden door closed silently behind them. Click. The sound of the bolt engaging was not the hollow, rattling clunk of a cheap farm lock. It was a heavy pneumatic thud. It sounded like the vault door of a federal bank. Arthur blinked as his eyes adjusted to the change from the bright afternoon light. He opened his mouth to make a dismissive comment about the entryway, but the words died instantly in his throat. The air inside the house was completely different from the porch. It was perfectly cooled to exactly 68 degrees. It did not smell like rotting wood or mold. It carried the faint, luxurious scent of sandalwood and freshly cut eucalyptus. He looked down. He was not standing on warped, creaking floorboards. His $3,000 shoes were resting on heated, poured concrete, flawlessly polished to a mirror shine. "What?" Arthur whispered, his heart lurching in his chest. He looked up and his mind struggled to process the spatial reality of what he was seeing. From the outside, the farmhouse had looked like a narrow, single-story shack, but standing inside the foyer, Arthur realized the original structure was nothing more than a hollow shell, a brilliantly deceptive piece of camouflage. The interior walls had been completely demolished. Instead of drywall, the space was defined by massive, exposed black steel beams and custom acoustic walnut slat panels. Just to his right, seamlessly integrated into the walnut panel, was a discrete security terminal glowing with a soft blue biometric interface. Arthur's blood ran cold. Caldwell Tech Solutions designed security software. He knew exactly what he was looking at. A fingerprint and vascular scanner. Military grade. Right this way, please, Clara said politely, walking past them. Her bare feet made no sound on the concrete. Chloe, completely oblivious to the architectural impossibilities surrounding her, was busy staring at her phone. My signal is totally dead in here. Do you have Wi-Fi? My followers need to see this. Arthur could not speak. He gripped Chloe by the elbow, pulling her forward as they followed Clara out of the foyer and into the main living space. If the foyer had been a shock, the main hall was a killing blow to Arthur's sanity. The entire rear half of the house simply did not exist. Where Arthur had expected to see a rotting kitchen, the floor dropped away into a massive, cavernous, sunken living room with 30-foot ceilings. The back wall of the house was constructed entirely of massive, floor-to-ceiling smart glass panels. The glass was currently transparent, offering a breathtaking, unobstructed view of a hidden gorge and a roaring waterfall that Arthur had not even known existed on the property. "What is this place?" Arthur managed to say, his voice cracking, a cold sweat breaking across his forehead. The room was a masterclass in discreet, hyper-modern billionaire-level luxury. A massive custom Minotti modular sofa sat at the center, positioned around a floating, open-flame titanium fireplace. Above the fireplace hung a massive canvas. Arthur's eyes locked onto it. He was a collector. He knew art. It was a Mark Rothko, an original. Arthur had bid on a similar piece at Sotheby's 2 years earlier and had been outbid by $40 million. "Is that a reproduction?" Arthur pointed a trembling finger at the canvas. Clara walked toward a massive, matte black kitchen island carved from a single slab of absolute black granite. She opened a sleek, handleless refrigerator seamlessly integrated into the cabinetry and pulled out a glass bottle of mineral water. "The Rothko know Arthur," Clara said casually, pouring water into 2 baccarat crystal glasses. "I acquired it through a private broker in Geneva a few months ago. It felt like the right piece for the space. The acoustics in here are a bit tricky, and the canvas actually helps dampen the echo." She said it with the casual indifference of someone discussing a rug from Target. Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her eyes widening as she absorbed the cavernous room. Her understanding strained to bridge the gap between the wreck outside and the fortress within. "Wait, I do not understand. Are we underground? How is the ceiling that high? Did you rent this place for the day just to fool us?" "I own the land, Chloe," Clara said calmly, walking over and handing them each a crystal glass. "As for the structure, the farmhouse is merely a historic preservation shell. A disguise, if you will." "A disguise for what, Clara?" Arthur demanded, his voice thick with rising panic. "What is this place?" Clara took a slow sip of her water, her calm eyes settling on Arthur's terrified ones. "During the Cold War," Clara began, her voice taking on an almost professorial tone, "the Department of Defense commissioned several hardened, nuclear attack-resistant underground backup facilities along the East Coast. Most were documented. A handful were kept strictly off the books, hidden beneath ordinary civilian structures." "Like a farmhouse," Arthur said, his stomach dropping into an endless abyss. "When I was doing data analysis for your firm," Clara continued, stepping closer to him, "I was not only analyzing consumer habits. I was running algorithms on classified real estate anomalies. I found this land. I realized what was buried beneath it. 3 levels of reinforced, climate-controlled underground infrastructure. Over 43,000 square feet of usable, impenetrable space." "You knew?" Arthur whispered, the reality of his monumental mistake slowly wrapping around his throat like a vice. "You knew all of this during the divorce." "I purchased land through a shell holding company years before the divorce," Clara corrected softly, "using the proceeds from my own early investments. When we separated, I simply made sure you kept your arrogant assumption that it was worthless. I let you keep your company, Arthur, because I did not need it." She paused. "I was already wealthier than you." Arthur stared at the woman he had discarded, the quiet, unremarkable wife he had traded in for a shiny new distraction. He stared at the $40 million painting, the military-grade security, the impossible architecture. "You brought us inside," Arthur said, his mind racing desperately for any angle of fault in her victory. Why? If you wanted to keep this secret, why let me see it? Clara's smile disappeared, replaced by a look so glacial and absolute that Arthur took an involuntary step backward. Because Arthur, Clara said softly, the silence of the bunker amplifying her every word, you did not come here simply to mock me. And I did not invite you inside simply to show off my renovation. She reached into the pocket of her cashmere sweater and withdrew a small, sleek black tablet. She touched the screen once. Instantly, the floor-to-ceiling smart glass at the rear of the room shifted from transparent to solid opaque black. The heavy pneumatic door locks resonated through the house, sealing them inside. The ambient lighting dimmed by 50%, bathing the room in a cold, severe glow. You are here, Clara said, her voice dropping an entire octave, because Caldwell Tech Solutions uses a proprietary encryption key for its central server matrix. An encryption key that you in your infinite laziness never bothered to change after I built it for you 7 years ago. Chloe dropped her tote bag on the concrete floor with a thud. Arthur, what is she doing? Tell her to open the door. I have a wedding dress fitting tomorrow morning. I am not dying in a basement with your crazy ex-wife. Shut up, Chloe. Arthur's eyes never left Clara. She is bluffing. She is just trying to frighten us, Clara smiled. That gentle, almost compassionate smile. She pressed one final icon on her screen. Instantly, the acoustic walnut slat wall to their left split silently down the middle, sliding open to reveal a massive, floor-to-ceiling bank of ultra-high-definition monitors. The screens blazed to life, flooding the dim room with a cascade of scrolling data, financial charts, and live video feeds. Arthur's breathing stopped. The central monitor showed a live feed of the Caldwell Tech Solutions server room in Manhattan. Arthur immediately recognized the layout. The server racks glowing blue, the distinctive red security doors. But something was wrong. The room was not bathed in its usual calm blue light. It was strobing in a frantic, pulsing amber. Do you recognize this, Arthur? Clara asked, leaning back against the cold granite counter. This is your central matrix, the beating heart of Caldwell Tech. The servers holding the private encrypted data of 300 Fortune 500 companies that trust you to keep their secrets safe. How are you accessing those cameras? Arthur demanded, stepping forward, his bluster dissolving rapidly into genuine panic. They are on an internal closed-circuit network. It is physically impossible to pull that feed externally. Nothing is impossible when you have the architect's blueprints, Clara answered. You see, Arthur, when you forced me out of the company to make room for your new vision, you assumed my contributions ended at the initial coding phase. You forgot that I designed the fundamental architecture of your security protocols. You were too cheap and too arrogant to rebuild from scratch. You simply layered shiny new interfaces over my original foundation. She slid one finger across her tablet. On the screen, a massive red warning banner appeared over the live server room feed. It read, Decryption critical, initiated. The data breach you have been dealing with for the past 2 quarters, Clara continued, her voice echoing coldly through the bunker. The one bleeding your capital and causing your board members, specifically Bradley Carmichael and Melanie Foster, to threaten to remove you. That was not a glitch, Arthur. It was not Russian hackers. She looked directly into his eyes. It was a stress test. I orchestrated every single bit of it. Arthur felt his knees weaken. Bradley Carmichael, his ruthless CFO, had been breathing down his neck for months, demanding answers about the security failures. Melanie Foster, the lead investor on the board, had told Arthur explicitly that one more breach would result in a no-confidence vote. You sabotaged your own company? Arthur stuttered. Clara, that is a federal crime. You are going to prison. I will have my lawyers destroy you. Nothing to destroy, Clara replied, with a brilliant melodic laugh that froze Arthur to his bones. Sabotage implies unauthorized access. I did not break into your house, Arthur. I simply used the front door key you legally handed me. She touched another button. A legal document appeared on one of the side monitors. It was heavily formatted, but Arthur recognized his own sprawling signature at the bottom. During the divorce settlement, Clara explained, her eyes gleaming with quiet, devastating triumph, your attorneys were so focused on protecting your liquid assets, your penthouse and your precious Maybach. They handed me a stack of paperwork regarding the dissolution of our shared intellectual property. Page 47, subsection 11. You signed over all rights to a dormant, seemingly worthless shell company called Apex Data Holdings. Arthur's mind raced. Apex Data Holdings. It was a shell corporation they had set up years earlier to hold a handful of preliminary patents. It had never generated a single dollar of revenue. He had signed it away without a second thought, assuming it was routine legal housekeeping. Apex Data Holdings, Clara said, savoring each word, owns the patent on the foundational decryption algorithm that Caldwell Tech relies upon to secure its servers. You do not own your own security infrastructure, Arthur. You have been licensing it from Apex Data Holdings, from me. She let that land. And the terms of that license, which you never bothered to read, clearly state that the patent holder retains administrative access for maintenance and auditing purposes. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. The room was spinning. You did not, Arthur whispered. I did, Clara confirmed. I own the architecture. And 1 hour ago, while you were busy making fun of my peeling porch, I formally revoked Caldwell Tech's license to use my algorithm, citing gross negligence and breach of contract. I have recovered my intellectual property, Arthur. Chloe, who had been listening to the exchange with growing horror, finally grasped the full implications. She looked from Clara to Arthur, her heavily contoured face gone completely pale. Arthur, Chloe said, her voice trembling. She means you do not own the company anymore. You are losing everything. Shut up, Chloe. Arthur's voice came out as a raw, broken rasp. He spun toward Clara, his face flushing purple with rage. You think you can get away with this? I will tie you up in litigation for decades. I will freeze every asset you have. You are a nobody. A nobody, Clara said calmly, who just initiated a full data purge. She pointed to the monitors. The amber strobing lights in the server room feed suddenly turned a solid, terrifying red. The numbers on the financial charts alongside the video feed began to plummet. This bunker is built with military-grade signal dampening, Clara said. But I have generously opened an encrypted localized Wi-Fi channel specifically for your phone. I suggest you check it. I imagine Bradley Carmichael has been trying to reach you. Right on cue, the sharp, shrill ringtone of Arthur's iPhone shattered the silence of the room. Arthur stared at his jacket pocket as though a venomous snake were vibrating inside it. The ringtone echoed off the concrete walls and the high ceilings, sounding completely foreign and infinitely threatening. He slowly reached into his tailored suit jacket and pulled out his phone. The caller ID was blinking aggressively. Bradley Carmichael. Urgent. Arthur's thumb hovered over the green button. His hands were shaking so violently he nearly dropped the device. He looked up at Clara. She was watching him with the serene, unshakable focus of a predator watching prey bleed out. Answer it, Arthur, Clara whispered softly. Leadership requires presence in a crisis. Arthur swallowed the dry knot in his throat and swiped the screen, pressing the phone against his ear. Bradley, he tried to say steadily, but his voice cracked, coming out as a hoarse, strained whisper. Arthur, where the hell have you been? Bradley's voice exploded through the earpiece so loud that even Chloe, standing 3 feet away, could hear every word. I have been trying to reach you for over an hour. The entire network is down, Arthur. All of it is gone. Calm down, Bradley. Just breathe. Tell me what is happening. Do not tell me to calm down, Bradley shouted. The central servers have locked us out. Administrative access codes have been completely wiped. The entire client database is currently unencrypted and fully exposed. The system is showing a massive license revocation. And Arthur, it gets worse. Arthur squeezed his eyes shut. How could it possibly get worse? Melanie Foster just called me from her private jet. Bradley's voice had shifted from shouting to something closer to barely controlled hysteria. She received a massive data dump from an anonymous source. It contained the original patent documentation, proving that Caldwell Tech does not own its own security infrastructure or intellectual property. Arthur, you lied to the board. You swore to us during the Series B financing round that we owned everything proprietary. Bradley, listen to me. It is a misunderstanding. My ex-wife is— I do not care about your ex-wife, Bradley interrupted violently. Melanie has activated the emergency contingency protocol. The board is calling an emergency vote in 20 minutes to remove you as CEO. And Arthur, she called the SEC. They are alleging corporate fraud. There are federal agents standing in the lobby of our building right now. Arthur felt the floor disappear beneath him. The air in the bunker felt impossibly thin. Bradley, stop them! Arthur pleaded, his voice collapsing into a pathetic whisper. Just give me 2 hours. I can fix this. I can negotiate with her. There is no negotiation, Arthur. You are done. We are all done. Caldwell Tech stock is in free fall on the after-hours market. We have lost 40% of our valuation in the last 45 minutes. Do not come to the office. Call a criminal defense attorney. The line went dead. Arthur slowly lowered the phone. The screen went black, reflecting the sudden, absolute emptiness of his future. He had built his entire identity, his entire ego, around being an industry titan. And in less than an hour, inside a concrete bunker he had not known existed, he had been systematically erased. You ruined me, Arthur whispered, staring at the polished concrete floor. I corrected you, Clara responded instantly, her voice carrying not a single trace of sympathy. You built a castle on a foundation of lies and stolen labor. I simply removed the foundation. Gravity did the rest. Chloe stared at Arthur, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrible realization. The lifestyle, the private jets, the designer clothes, the penthouse, all of it was evaporating right before her eyes. Arthur, Chloe demanded, her voice climbing toward hysteria. Tell me she is joking. Tell me you did not just lose everything. What about my ring? What about the wedding in Santorini? Arthur did not respond. He could not. He slowly turned his gaze back to Clara. The rage that had been simmering beneath his panic finally boiled over. You think you have won? Arthur growled, taking a menacing step toward her. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. You think you can lock me in here, take my company and just walk away? I will destroy you, Clara. I will come at you physically if I have to. He lunged forward, reaching for her, intending to wipe that composed, victorious expression from her face. Clara did not flinch. She did not step back. She did not raise her hands to defend herself. Before Arthur could close the distance between them, a sudden, deafening mechanical roar erupted from the ceiling. A high-voltage, non-lethal electrical arc discharged from a concealed biometric security node directly above the kitchen island, striking the floor less than 2 inches from Arthur's Italian leather shoes. The sound inside the enclosed space was like a thunderclap. The concrete scorched black instantly. Arthur screamed, stumbling backward and falling hard against the edge of the Minotti sofa. He scrambled away from the burn mark, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. I would not do that, Arthur, Clara advised, calmly, placing her crystal glass back on the granite counter. As I mentioned, this is a Department of Defense backup installation. The automated defense protocols are fully integrated into the smart home system. My biometric signature is the only one on the whitelist. Any sudden aggressive movement toward me registers as a hostile threat. The system will neutralize you long before you can touch me. Arthur lay on the floor, breathing in heavy, ragged gasps, staring up at the ceiling in pure terror. He was completely powerless. Trapped in an impenetrable fortress stripped of his wealth, his reputation, and his authority, reduced to a cowering wreck on the floor. Chloe erupted into loud, ugly, heaving sobs, sinking to her knees beside her fallen bag. I cannot be broke, she wailed, mascara running down her cheeks in thick black rivers. I cannot go back to waiting tables, Arthur. You promised me I would never have to work again. Clara looked down at the pathetic scene unfolding in her immaculate living room. The great arrogant CEO and his gold-digging fiancée both completely shattered, sobbing on the floor of the house they had driven 3 hours to ridicule. "You see, Arthur," Clara said, walking around the kitchen island to stand above him. "You drove 3 hours upstate to stare at a rotting facade. You wanted to point and laugh at the decay, to feel superior, but you were too blind to realize what the rotting facade was actually reflecting." She leaned slightly downward, her clear eyes boring directly into his terrified ones. Caldwell Tech was the crumbling house, a shiny exterior hiding a collapsing, rotten core. "You were the one living in ruin, Arthur. I simply finally decided to tear the walls down." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a suffocating, terrifying stillness that seemed to pull the oxygen directly from the lungs. The bunker was completely cut off from the outside world. No wind, no cicadas, no distant hum of highway traffic. Only the quiet, rhythmic breathing of 3 people in a room that suddenly felt like a polished concrete tomb. Arthur stared at Clara's sleek black tablet, his mind violently rejecting the reality of the situation. "Dismantle my empire?" Arthur repeated, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle and pathetic even to his own ears. He loosened his silk tie, feeling suddenly and desperately hot. "Clara, you have lost your mind. Living underground like this has made you delusional. Caldwell Tech is a publicly traded monolith. I have a board of directors. I have the best cybersecurity team in Manhattan. You cannot just press a button on a tablet and bring me down." Clara walked slowly toward the massive matte black kitchen island, touching the screen of her tablet with agonizing deliberateness. "You are right, Arthur," she said softly. "I cannot simply press one button. It requires a sequence, a very specific, highly orchestrated sequence of events that I have been preparing for the past 8 months, while you were busy taking Chloe shopping in Milan and ignoring your quarterly risk assessment reports." Chloe, who had been staring at the sealed door, spun around, her voice sharp with panic. "Arthur, what is she talking about? Tell her to let us out. I have a bridal fitting tomorrow morning. I am not staying in some underground bunker with your psychotic ex-wife." "Be quiet, Chloe," Arthur hissed, his eyes never leaving Clara. "She is bluffing. She is just trying to frighten us." Clara smiled. She pressed one final icon. The acoustic walnut slat wall to their left split silently down the middle, sliding open to reveal the massive floor-to-ceiling bank of ultra-high-definition monitors. Arthur stared at the central screen showing the live feed of his server room, the red alarm light washing everything in a terrifying glow. And then Clara walked him through every piece of the trap she had been building for 8 long months, step by step, patent by patent, signature by signature. And then came Bradley's call. And then came the SEC. And then the floor truly disappeared. Chloe, who had absorbed every word of the exchange with growing horror, finally understood the full scope of what she was standing inside. She looked from Clara to Arthur, her heavily made-up face the color of chalk. And then, with the survival instincts of someone who had spent years navigating high society as a professional opportunist, Chloe did the only thing she knew how to do. She pivoted. She turned to Clara, dropping her voice to a soft, fabricated vulnerability. "Clara," Chloe said, her tone entirely stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Miss Hayes, please. You have to understand, I had nothing to do with his business dealings. I was just as much a victim here. He lied to me. He told me he was a self-made genius. I had no idea he built any of this on your work. You are a woman. You know how these powerful, manipulative men can be." Arthur's head snapped up from the floor, his eyes wide with wounded disbelief. "Chloe, what in the hell are you doing?" Chloe did not even glance at him. She took a careful step toward the kitchen island, keeping her distance from the scorched mark on the floor. "I will testify against him, Clara. I will tell the SEC everything I know about his offshore accounts. I know where he hides the secondary ledgers in the penthouse. Just let me go." I did not ruin my life just because he ruined his. Clara studied the younger woman with a long, deep, clinically detached look. "You are a genuinely remarkable creature, Chloe," Clara said, with calm amusement picking up her tablet. No loyalty, no substance, just a parasitic reflex. But you are misreading your position in this room. I am not ruining your life. I am simply removing the host you attached yourself to. What you do with your life from this moment forward is entirely your own problem. Clara touched the screen and the massive bank of monitors shifted. The financial charts disappeared, replaced by a live security feed from the interior of Arthur's opulent Manhattan penthouse. The camera angle was from the building's own security network, looking directly into Arthur's private foyer. Arthur crawled to his knees, staring at the screen in horror. 4 individuals in dark jackets with the letters DOJ in bold yellow on the back were swinging a battering ram directly into his custom mahogany double doors. "My apartment," Arthur gasped, clutching his chest. "You gave them access to my building." "I provided the Department of Justice with an anonymous tip," Clara corrected coolly, "regarding the precise location of a hard drive containing unredacted internal communications between you and Bradley Carmichael. Communications in which you explicitly discussed concealing the data breaches from the board and falsifying quarterly earnings reports to inflate your share price ahead of a planned stock sale next month." Arthur felt his heart seize. "How did you get those emails?" "They were encrypted on an offline private server." "Arthur, please?" Clara sighed, sounding genuinely exhausted by his stupidity. "I built the private server. I left a backdoor in the code 7 years ago. A backdoor you were too incompetent to ever find. They have everything. The fraud, the embezzlement, the wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. They are dismantling your penthouse down to the studs as we speak. You are looking at decades in federal prison." Arthur's mind fractured completely under the weight of it all. He looked around the bunker at the $40 million Rothko, the military-grade security, the impenetrable walls. "Hide me," Arthur suddenly begged, his voice collapsing into a high, pathetic whimper. He crawled forward on his hands and knees, stopping just short of the scorched concrete. "Clara, please. You have this bunker. Nobody knows it exists. Let me stay here. I will sign anything you want. I will give you anything. Just do not let them take me to prison." Clara's expression remained completely impassive, sculpted from the same ice that had been freezing Arthur's veins since the moment he stepped inside. "You are not staying in my home, Arthur," she said softly. "But you are right about one thing. You are going to sign something." She walked around the granite island and held the tablet out toward him. "This is a digital transfer authorization," she explained, her voice resonating through the vast, quiet room. "It is a legally binding directive pre-approved by the SEC Restitution Fund, transferring the entirety of your personal liquid assets, your offshore Cayman accounts, and your remaining stock options to a victim compensation trust. The trust will be used to reimburse the clients whose data you compromised. Every cent you personally possess, Arthur, gone." Arthur stared at the glowing screen. "If I sign that, I will have nothing, not even enough money for a defense attorney. I will be completely broke." "You are already broke," Clara reminded him. "The only choice left to you is how you walk out of this room. You can sign this, voluntarily surrendering the stolen funds, and I will unlock the front door. You can walk out of here, get in your car, and face the authorities like a man." Clara paused, her eyes narrowed to dark, dangerous slits. "Or you can refuse, and I will exit through the secondary emergency exit, seal this installation, and leave you both down here in the dark. The life support systems are automated. The air purifiers will keep you breathing. But the food and water reserves are secured behind my biometric locks. It would take the federal government weeks to find this bunker, let alone breach it. How long do you think you can survive on tap water and desperation?" Arthur looked at Chloe, who was backing away from him as though he were radioactive. He looked at the black burn scar on the concrete floor. He looked at the woman he had thrown away and saw for the first time with absolute clarity and without the protective fog of arrogance what she had always truly been. Not his quiet, boring ex-wife, his executioner. His hands trembling violently, Arthur reached out and pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner on the tablet. A green light blinked. "Transfer authorized. Funds liquiders." "Good," Clara said quietly, pulling the tablet back. She turned away from them both, walking slowly toward the towering wall of smart glass overlooking the hidden gorge. She did not bother to look over her shoulder. "The door is open," Clara said, her voice drifting back to them, perfectly calm and devastatingly dismissive. "Get out of my house." Arthur slowly peeled himself off the polished concrete floor. His legs felt completely hollow, vibrating with the residual shock of the electrical warning and the catastrophic collapse of everything he had ever built. He felt violently ill. A cold, nauseating sweat clung to his skin as the adrenaline finally crashed. He had lost his company. He had lost his fortune. He had lost his freedom. He staggered toward the foyer, leaning heavily against the acoustic walnut slat walls just to stay upright. Chloe did not wait for him. She sprinted past, elbows pumping, clutching her bag to her chest with both arms, her eyes wide and glassy with the feral, frantic desperation to escape the underground space and salvage whatever fragment of her luxurious life she still could. Arthur followed her into the dim foyer. He placed his trembling hand on the weathered brass handle of the front door. He stopped. He looked back over his shoulder one final time, harboring one last, pathetic, stubborn hope that he might see some trace of pity, some trace of the quiet, forgiving wife he used to know. But Clara was simply standing beside the glass, taking a slow sip of her mineral water, completely captivated by the waterfall cascading through the hidden gorge. She had erased him completely from her reality. Arthur pushed the heavy door open. The humid July heat hit him instantly, suffocating and thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. He stepped out onto the rotting wooden porch, the warped planks groaning in protest under his weight. He was back in the real world. The flawless air-conditioned illusion of the multi-million-dollar bunker was gone, replaced by the humiliating reality of his defeat. "Move it, Arthur, come on!" Chloe snapped from the yard below. She was already halfway down the crumbling front steps, her immaculate white Louboutin heels sinking deep into the mud and overgrown dandelions. "Give me the Maybach keys." "I am driving. I need to get to Teterboro Airport before my platinum cards are declined." Arthur fumbled in his pocket, his fingers numb, as he pulled out the heavy silver remote. He stumbled down the wooden steps in a daze, his shoes sinking immediately into the thick brown mud. The heavy July air clung to his ruined Brioni suit. They reached the midnight blue Mercedes Maybach. Chloe grabbed the chrome door handle and yanked it frantically, her manicured nails scraping against the metal. Locked. Arthur pressed the unlock button on the remote. Nothing happened. No blinking lights, no soft chirp of the alarm disarming. He pressed it again, harder, his thumb going white with pressure. The luxury vehicle remained completely dead. Frantic Arthur pulled out his iPhone to use the digital key app. As the screen lit up, an avalanche of notifications flooded the display. He watched in real time as his digital life was systematically dismantled. Chase private client access denied, account frozen, secure email authentication failed, credentials revoked, Amex Centurion card suspended, please contact customer service. And then a single text message appeared from an encrypted, blocked number. Arthur opened it. His eyes moved across the screen. The message read, "The Maybach S680 is a corporate lease under Caldwell Tech Solutions. As you are no longer CEO, the acting board of directors has flagged the vehicle as company property. I took the liberty of remotely disabling the engine telemetry via the onboard satellite uplink. Additionally, the New York State Police have been notified of your exact GPS coordinates and are currently en route to the dirt road. Run if you like, Arthur. It will only make the security footage more entertaining." Arthur let out a dry, choked gasp. The phone slipped from his trembling fingers, dropping directly into a deep puddle of muddy water. Chloe, having read the screen over his shoulder, recoiled from him as if he had burst into flames. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, undiluted venom. "Arthur, unlock the car!" Chloe shrieked, slamming her fists against the bulletproof tinted windows. "Unlock it right now. I am not going to prison for you. I am not." "It is dead," Arthur whispered, staring at his mud-streaked reflection in the car's immaculate paint. "Everything is dead, Chloe. It is all over." Chloe stared at him. The realization that he was no longer a golden opportunity but a massive sinking anchor settled over her in a single crystallizing instant. Without another word, she kicked off her ruined designer heels. Barefoot and sobbing hysterically, she turned and ran, bolting down the overgrown driveway, her arms swinging wildly, disappearing into the thick, thorny tree line. Arthur did not try to stop her. He did not move a single muscle. In the silence that followed, across the tree line, Arthur heard it. The distinct, terrifying wail of police sirens, growing louder with every passing second, resonating through the rural Hudson Valley hills, closing in like a tightening noose. He slowly turned and looked at the house one final time. From the outside, it was still a rotting nightmare, the white paint peeling in ugly strips, the porch roof sagging dangerously in the center, the invasive ivy strangling the life from the crumbling brick chimney. It looked exactly like a monument to absolute failure. Arthur fell to his knees in the mud, destroying his suit, obliterating what was left of his pride. The sirens were deafening now. Red and blue lights strobed violently through the trees, casting long, distorted shadows across the dark, overgrown yard. As the first New York State police cruiser swung aggressively onto the dirt road, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and gravel, Arthur looked at the collapsing front porch one last time. The heavy, weathered wooden door was slowly swinging shut. The metal bolt clicked into place with a sharp, absolute finality, leaving Arthur Caldwell in the dirt, exactly where he had always belonged. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It means more than you know. See you in the next one.